Welcome to Government Speak. This is where we'll cut through the government speak to get the information you need about county programs, services, and events straight from the source. Welcome to Government Speak, Contra Costa County's official podcast. I'm your host, Kristi Jourdan, Contra Costa County's Public Information Officer. And today we are joined in studio by District 1 Supervisor John Gioia. Supervisor, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here, Kristi. Looking forward to our conversation.
So let's get into it. You are one of California's and Contra Costa County's longest serving supervisors. It's 26 years and counting.
Right, that's correct.
What keeps you coming back? Where's the passion for public service? Where does that come from?
Well, first I want to say I'm really honored and privileged to represent the community that I grew up in, the Richmond area, because I feel that the west part of the county really understands the positive role that government can play, and I can be a voice to reflect the values of that part of the county where people feel that government can support people from a standpoint of health and social services and equity. So I'm honored to represent the area for as long as I have. I really thank the voters for sending me back to the board. But it really started with my dad. My father was a 20-year high school government teacher at Kennedy High School in Richmond, and he taught history and civics and business law, and I think he inspired in me a passion for civic involvement. In fact, he used to bring in speakers to his classroom to talk to his students. He'd bring in journalists and politicians. He actually once brought in a U.S. senator. He brought in Congressman George Miller multiple times. He brought in local council members and labor leaders. So he exposed his students and said to them, in our democracy, you have rights and you have responsibilities, and you exercise your rights by also exercising your responsibilities. And so he inspired that civic engagement value in me, and I thank him to this day. Unfortunately, he passed away before I was ever elected to office, but his inspiration really, I think, got me started in this.
What a profound experience for you to be, exposed to so many different types of public service. Mm-hmm. And you just mentioned it here. Anyone who listens to you speak hears you often reference health and equity. Mm-hmm. Why is that important to you, and what do you want people in the community to know about the county's efforts and about your efforts to make this come to fruition through programs and services in the county?
Well, to me, everything we do, and I have thought about this a lot and focused on it, is really about improving health and equity, whether it's individual health, whether it's the community's health, better opportunities to prepare young people for education and careers, whether it's about reducing pollution and community health, whether it's about San Francisco Bay and health of the Bay. Everything revolves around individual or community health. And then about equity, because we live in a society that has too many inequities, a long history of racism and injustices. And, we want to make sure not just that county services bring people to a position where we can achieve equity, but really changing society, changing how we think about providing everyone an equal level playing field. And county government has tremendous power to do this because we provide almost every type of service. Think about it. We deal with the criminal justice system. We deal with health and social services and preschool and planning and the condition of our communities and infrastructure through public works. So we touch every aspect of people's lives and can have enormous power to achieve equity through our work. And so for me, health and equity drive everything that I do.
One of the ways that I think that came to the spotlight very quickly for a large number of us was during COVID and the global pandemic. Can you talk about the county's efforts in response to the pandemic and the ongoing COVID issues that still exist today? And then how did the county's efforts close the disparity gap in that response?
Well, I think COVID was a perfect example of a tragedy that really exposed more of the inequities in our society, in our country. And that came about when you looked at the disparity in testing rates between African American, Latino, and non-Latino white, for example. It was also displayed through the disparity in vaccination rates. And for a long period of time, the African American community and Latino community were getting vaccinated at a much lower percent than the white community. And of course, African American community especially suffering the most from impacts from COVID. So working with the health department, I think we were able to really work hard to close that disparity gap on vaccines in the Latino community, not quite close it in the African American community, but closed it significantly. And we did that through messengers in the Latino and African American communities that were trusted and respected. So it wasn't just the message, it was who we engaged as messengers. And but as I say, I think COVID exposed a lot of what is wrong in the disparities that we have. And I do applaud the hard work of the men and women, not just in the health department, but across all aspects of county service. I just want to say, I think public service is a noble profession, and I acknowledge all the county employees across all the departments who stepped up to keep our community safer during the pandemic and help close the disparity gap. There's other things there's still a lot more work that needs to be done, however, but that was at least one effort that it was accomplished.
One of the points that you just focused on is something that, from a public information standpoint, I'm really concerned with making sure that we do have the right folks carrying the right messages at the right times. How were those trusted messengers identified? Can you talk about some of the relationship building? One of the ways that we communicate from a county perspective, we want to make sure that we're not just posting things on Twitter and Nextdoor and calling that good. It's identifying those folks to truly connect and talk about all those great services that you were commenting on earlier. So how were those trusted folks identified?
Well, the good thing is they reached out to us. I mean, while we all did outreach into communities, they also spoke up and said, look, we know how to reach our communities. For example, the faith community, a number of pastors in the African American Latino communities spoke up and said, we can be impactful and meaningful messengers. And indeed they were. So that was an example. I think the community rose up with its own voice and said, ask us how best to reach our community. And the health department listened. I think the county listened. It took a while at first. In fact, one of the things I strongly advocated for is that, look, when we're putting out communications, we need to do it in Spanish at the same time it goes out in English. It's not equity to say we're going to put it out in Spanish a day or two later. It needs to be at the same time. And we did. We did that. So there's a lot we can learn from that, and there's a lot we can feel proud of, but also learn that we can continue to do things better. And we've done a lot to also expand healthcare to people regardless of their immigration status, because when everybody's healthy, everybody's healthier. And we saw that with COVID, that it doesn't only attack certain people. Some people are more impacted by it, but it affects everybody. So there's a lot of initiatives we're working on. One of the ones I'm really excited about is the creation of our Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice, something I know Supervisor Glover and I had talked about for a number of years. And we had talked to a number of people in the community who believed that the county could play an important role in achieving equity across race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, disability status, language, all these across many many populations. And so we, Supervisor Glover and I, took a proposal to the board in the middle of the pandemic after we passed Measure X to actually create this office and use Measure X funding to really staff it and get it going. And what we did differently, I think, than any other county is we didn't just say, here's how we think the office should get established. We actually went out and raised a couple $100,000 from foundations so there could be an independent, non-county run community process led by community to determine what the priorities of the office should be, how it should be established. And we that process took about 18 months, a little longer than we thought, but takes time to really engage the community, especially during the pandemic. And the community came back with a great series of recommendations that the Board of Supervisors implemented. And we're glad to have our co-directors on board. And the office is now being staffed up. And there's a lot of issues we're taking on, including the establishment of a new African-American wellness hub in Contra Costa, new youth centers in parts of the county that don't really have them, and really looking at all the work that we currently do across departments. Not that the county hadn't been doing work on equity. I think this just pushes it further and also changes the model of how we do it by engaging the community more. We do have a racial justice oversight body, which used to be the Racial Justice Task Force, that came up with a series of recommendations to look at disparities in the criminal justice system, where African Americans are arrested and incarcerated at a much higher level than their percent of the population, and so we are looking forward to that work and how we can be effective.
So the board appointed the co-directors last year, Kendra Carr, Peter Kim, and they are staffing up the office. I saw they just had their new office over in 1026 Escobar. They're working to kind of ramp that up. They're also hiring. Do you have any details about how they're trying to build the team, what their areas of focus are? Yes,
there's going to be positions that deal with language equity. So, I mean, that's a key issue. Positions to look at doing data analysis so we can come up with the best policies based on real life data. They need their own support from a policy standpoint. They need administrative support. But I think the language equity position will be very important. We're a county where 25% of the people who live here were born in another country. My mother was an immigrant to this country from Italy, and my son's mom was an immigrant to this country from Peru. I think we are a county of immigrants, and many languages are spoken, and part of it is achieving language equity.
You had mentioned also that it's Measure X funded. For those who might not be as well versed, what is Measure X?
Well, I am really proud that the voters in Contra Costa, in the middle of the pandemic, supported a sales tax, the first sales tax to Contra Costa County government ever, to support our safety net. And that was supported right in the middle of the pandemic in November of 2020, raises about $110 million a year. And so far with that money, we have done a lot of really impactful things. We've reopened fire stations. We have improved emergency medical services. We have made more robust our county health system. We're funding so many improvements to our county health delivery system. And people may not realize it, but nearly 200,000 people in this county get their health services through our own network of physicians and nurses and other professionals. So that's a great thing. We need to support that structure. I'm really proud that we established this very innovative A3 program, which is a mental health crisis response system where you could call 911 or another number and have a mental health, behavioral health specialist show up in a crisis and that could be with or without law enforcement, depending on the situation. And we're supporting more funding for food insecurity and seniors, and developing youth centers. So and more, a lot more. And so that measure is, I think, really going a long way toward achieving better health and improved equity in the county. And it is funding the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice. So a lot of good things came out of it. I think the public during the pandemic realized the important role that county government plays. We were very visible. We would have had significantly more deaths had we not acted as aggressively and thoroughly as we did. And I'm proud of that. So I think our impact and visibility went up during the pandemic, and one reason why people supported this measure. We were one of the only counties in the Bay Area that did not have our own dedicated sales tax. Now we do.
Wow. And there's more to come in that discussion as well.
More to come, a lot more issues. And but as some say, it's a lot better to argue how to spend money you have than to not have the argument because you don't have the money.
Right.
So look, it's okay. I really appreciate the work of the Measure X Community Advisory Board that we established. We funded their recommendations, I think, guided overwhelmingly most of our decisions on investing these dollars. Not all, but most. So it's a good thing, and I really value their input.
Another major project that the county has been working on is updating the general plan. Mm-hmm. What is the general plan, and can you talk about some of its areas of focus, specifically around environmental justice and sustainability?
So I want to step back and do what my father often did and teach for a second. So, because the general plan is part of our power on zoning and planning in the unincorporated areas. But to step back for a second, I think one thing people should realize, most of what county government does is we are the social safety net, health, social services, and many other services to all county residents, whether you live in a city or the unincorporated area. We're a county of nearly 1.2 million people. About 180,000 of them live in the unincorporated area. The rest live in cities. So whether it's the criminal justice system, whether it's our assessor's office, the treasurer's office, animal services, library, public works is just unincorporated. But these other functions are across the county. Then on top of that, we are like city government or municipal government if you live in an unincorporated area, whether it's Kensington, El Sobrante, Alamo, North Richmond, Bay Point, Rodeo. So our planning and public works departments only have authority in those unincorporated areas. So getting back to the general plan, it is like the constitution of land use planning. It develops the policies of how development occurs in the unincorporated areas only. And we haven't updated the general plan in over 30 years. And so we are finishing up a multi-year process that started from before the pandemic for a new general plan, which for the first time will have new policies on environmental justice, sustainability, economic development, and health. It will also lay out our vision for how we achieve more housing, more affordable housing, which is a major need and a crisis in the Bay Area. Also, how does this county transition away from fossil fuels? We are the second most industrialized county in the state after LA, with 4 refineries, 2 of whom are already converting to being the world's largest renewable fuel facilities, where they take soybean oil and other types of feedstock that's not crude oil and produce renewable diesel. So these are important. How does this affect existing workers? How do we create what I call the new energy economy in Contra Costa? So our general plan is really setting policies for that. Frontline communities like North Richmond that have been on the front lines of pollution because they're near industry or a refinery need to also be on the front lines of the benefits of our transition to a clean energy economy. So our general plan is laying out a lot of those policies and will guide our development going forward, which relates to pollution issues. I spent a lot of time. I'm on the Bay Area Quality Management District Board, And then for 7 years, I was Governor Brown's appointee to the California Air Resources Board, setting a lot of statewide policies on cutting pollution, addressing climate change, and how we move forward. And there's a number of communities in Contra Costa that are impacted by pollution, our industrial waterfront, from Antioch, Pittsburgh, over through Martinez, Rodeo, into Richmond, have the highest rates of asthma in the county, and some of that due to pollution. And so there's a lot of progress I think we have made, not just at the county, but with the Air District and with community rising up to say, we need to be aggressive about improving health and equity by cutting pollution. And the Air District has passed, I'm proud to say, a number of new regulations that reduce air pollution in communities surrounding these facilities. And so the county will continue to look at, what eventually replaces this, that keeps our economy strong, provides workforce opportunities, and is cleaner.
So to make all that happen, with the general plan update, what's the next step on that in terms of getting approval and actually laying out the next, decade's worth of vision?
Mm-hmm. Well, we're hoping to approve the general plan in the fall, September, October range, and then the planning department will amend our zoning code, update our zoning. That can't happen until we amend and update the general plan. Here's an example of some of the policies, and we've already started this in North Richmond. So FedEx came in, and so I want to make this real. FedEx came in and wanted to build a major distribution center housing 100 trucks. So the community in North Richmond says, yes, we want jobs, but we don't want the diesel pollution that goes with those jobs. So what we did is we actually imposed a condition, and we worked with FedEx on this, so that they've opened now. When they opened, a third of their trucks, delivery trucks, were zero emission, non-polluting, and by year 5, 100% have to be zero emission, non-polluting. Fastest transition to electric trucks anywhere in the country. And we're able to do this in this project, but these are the types of policies we're putting in the plan to protect communities. We're saying, yes, we want jobs, but we don't necessarily want all the pollution associated with that. So these have significant effects on communities. And I'm proud to say that even FedEx holds this up as a model facility and says we want all our facilities to be like this eventually. So we can work with business, and we can still hold them to higher standards.
But that's also a great example of listening to people and actually putting their feedback into action. We
Yes.
want the jobs, but not at the expense of our health.
That's right.
So,
yes, I think we can do both. It's not either or, and I think that's a really important thing for us.
So we talked about general plan, we've talked about Measure X, we talked a lot about really big, important projects and issues in front of the board. What about criminal justice reform? What has the board worked on, in recent years to reform our criminal justice system?
I think one of the things we did a number of years ago was realizing that, take our juvenile justice system. Most of the young people in our juvenile justice system, as in this country, are youth of color, African American and Latino youth. We eliminated, we were one of the first counties to eliminate juvenile justice fees. These are these fees that families pay for young people in the juvenile justice system, because those fees further set back that family and therefore that young person from achieving and moving forward, because it places an economic burden on these families of color. And I remember after we adopted this groundbreaking ordinance along with Alameda County, I went to Sacramento and testified on a state bill, which then eventually prohibited these fees statewide. So our work was in advance of what the state did. And what we're also doing, though, in addition to just eliminating fees, is we're trying to provide alternatives to young people to thrive. And the RISE Youth Center is a perfect example of that. They have partnerships with our probation department, with our district attorney's office, so that young people aren't incarcerated, but first have an opportunity to let's say, be in a program in a youth center, and which is shown to be much more effective than incarcerating a young person in juvenile hall. And that's an example of a project that started over 20 years ago when listening to students at Richmond High School. I remember talking to and listening to young people who said, we need more places for young people in the after-school hours. And so I worked with a woman named Kimberly Aceves, who was executive director of Youth Together, doing work at Richmond High School, and said, how can we locate a place for young people? And we identified a vacant county building in Richmond. But here's what was most important. We didn't just say, okay, we have a building, we're going to set this up. We stopped. We invested in a process where young people said, this is what we need and are looking for in a youth center. Sort of like the community process we did for the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice. I really believe in those processes. And so we developed a nonprofit, which was called RISE, and it built out a youth center based on the needs of young people in West County. And the good news, the fortunate thing was the county owned all the land around it. So over time, they expanded and now own all the land that they are on. They actually have a health clinic there. They have recording studio, career programs, arts and culture programs, mental health programs. It's just fun. It's a fun. I wish there were a place like that when I was growing up in Richmond.
Yeah.
It's really fun, and to me, I get a lot of. I learn a lot. I learned a lot in that process because I originally said, let's just open the center, and young people said, no, we need to spend some time. And the reason that to invest in what that center should have, and I think that's why young people go there. That's why it's successful, because they were invested in it from the very beginning. And I think that's a model where county government can play a really important role, but not necessarily control the process. We do provide a fair amount of funding. It's property we used to have, but it was community-led. Likewise, this project we're working on in North Richmond with Urban Tilth, a great nonprofit in the community that's using 3 acres of former county land plus other land to create a community farm that's also about stewardship of the land, healthy eating. Talk about health and equity. It's a perfect example of that. And Doria Robinson, their executive director, who's now on the city council, has just done an amazing job implementing this. So it's a place where young people can work, where they can learn about health and nutrition and environmental stewardship. And so to me, projects like that are important. It's not just about the policy. And that's what's great about county government. We don't just get to make policies, we get to figure out how we're implementing those policies in a meaningful way. And that's, I think, what makes county government the best level of government to be at, and why I love it, and why I didn't run for the state legislature or anything else, because you get to be in touch at all levels.
So if there's one takeaway from today's discussion for our listeners, what would you want them to leave, remembering about all of the information and all of the topics that you covered today? What's the big takeaway? That
residents can make a difference if they get engaged. It can be a difference in their neighborhood, in their church, in their workplace, in their community, in the county, at whatever level. It is, you can make a difference. And a lot of the things we've done to achieve health and equity happened because community spoke up and said, we want these things to happen. And that's the power. So I think when government can reflect the voice of community and that power, we build support for what we do. That's why residents approved Measure X to give us more money to do things like that. And so you can make a difference in being involved and caring about your community, and put pressure on us in elected office to do these things, because most elected officials want to hear from you and want to be accountable.
That's it for today's show. Thanks for joining us on the Government Speak podcast, brought to you by the Office of Communications and Media. But don't just take our word for it. Stay curious, stay connected, and stay informed. Until next time, keep your mind open and your facts straight.